A former Conservative cabinet minister has suggested the government's tax credit reforms could be tweaked before they come into force in April. But Andrew Mitchell said he backed the very tough reforms overall. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell confirmed Labour would reverse the cuts after two frontbenchers declined to make the commitment in interviews. Labour is challenging Tory MPs to join them in opposing the reforms in a Commons vote on Tuesday. The government's plans to reduce spending on tax credits were approved by MPs last month. From April, the threshold at which tax credits begin to be withdrawn will fall from £6,420 to £3,850, and people's income over this amount will be reduced more steeply. Mr. Mitchell, the former International Development Secretary and Conservative Chief Whip, told the BBC's Sunday Politics the changes were needed because the current system was out of control. He added, "It's a very tough measure, but it's greatly compensated by other changes in the tax and welfare system. We've got some time before it comes in so that we can tweak it if necessary, but I think it is the right reform to make, and overall we can make sure there are as few losers from this as possible." He said he was sure Chancellor George Osborne was keeping an open mind and could make changes in next month's comprehensive spending review. Mr. Mitchell also called for individual treatment through the Department for Work and Pensions for those affected, saying the government had to minimize the impact on hard-working and low-paid families. Labour will use an opposition debate on Tuesday to urge the government to reverse the changes, although any vote that takes place will not change the law as the reforms have already been approved by Parliament. Former Labour Minister Frank Field is seeking a separate debate on his own proposals, which he says would mitigate the effects of the reforms at no extra cost. Mr. Field said he had cross-party backing for his suggestion, which involves a secondary earnings threshold of £13,100, paid for by taking away tax credits at a faster rate for people earning above the minimum wage. On Sunday, neither Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury Seema Malhotra nor Shadow International Development Secretary Diane Abbott would pledge their reversal under a Labour government. Lower taxes. Ms. Malhotra said the cuts should not go forward, while Ms. Abbott said Mr. McDonnell's fiscal mandate would set out the party's policy. Mr. McDonnell then tweeted that if Chancellor George Osborne would not reverse the cuts, "We're making it clear that we will." More than 3 million low-paid workers will be told just before Christmas how much they will lose from the changes to tax credits. The government says other reforms, including a national living wage, increased personal tax allowance and expanding childcare, will compensate for the reforms, and Prime Minister David Cameron has rejected calls for a change of course. Speaking on the BBC's Andrew Marr show, Defence Secretary Michael Fallon said the current tax credit system was not very sensible, saying even some MPs were eligible to receive the payments. "We need to focus welfare on where it is needed most, and move our country to where you keep more of your earnings, lower tax and lower welfare," he said. Conservative Chief Secretary to the Treasury Greg Hands attacked Labour's approach, saying the opposition's economic policy was lurching from chaos to increased edibility. He questioned how Labour would cover the cost of reversing the measures.